personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with the industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, Heidi Saas. She is a data privacy and technology attorney from the East Coast, Heidi Saas LLC. That's your company. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. You are super duper sassy. I love your work. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, but the first time I ever saw you in action, I looked at a video. I think you were hosting the Data Collaboration Alliance Data Drop session. So they have sessions every month where they talk about, they have different people on and you're the host. And I was so impressed by your manner. You know, you're just kind of a ball of energy. You're a very straight talker. You're very funny, very witty in the way that you put things. And you like to sort of cut through the BS for everything and put things out there. So I love your work, and it's so fun for me to be able to do this show with you today.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I love your work. I collect smart people. And I think I told you, you're one of the first people that I came for when I started working in privacy a couple of years ago, because I thought, oh my gosh, she's sharing all this information. And I never heard you say anything that was wrong. And I certainly don't know everything. So we learned so much by listening to each other that you provided a great resource for people, on practitioners as well as business owners, everybody that's listening to your stuff. We're all learning at the same time because it is a new industry. But you were one of the first people I went for. I said, oh man, the Data Diva, she totally knows what's up. And she said it, it's gospel, just go with it. And yeah, I've turned everybody I've mentored into privacy through the exam since then. It's like, you've got to follow her immediately and to listen to what she says. And if you're lucky enough to talk to her, then make everything you can of the opportunity. So I sent you one of the first articles that I wrote in privacy because I've been working in it for a while and took the exam. And I felt like I knew enough about it to start writing articles, because it's kind of a pet peeve when you see new people show up and now they're starting to write about it. You're like, okay. So,
right.
So I wasn't really sure. So I reached out to you and I sent it to you, and you took the time to look at it and say, no, this is good information, do this, and then gave some excellent pointers about it. And it made a huge impression on me that you just freely gave your time like that. So, I mean, it says a lot about the community that we're in. So the relationships matter, I think, the most.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. That must've been a while back.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago, but I never forgot. I'm like, oh man, she's one of my heroes now. So I'm excited to be on your show to talk about all kinds of things. So
yeah. Oh wow, I totally forgot about that, Heidi. Oh my goodness, that's so cool. Well,
you're changing lives everywhere, Debbie. You don't even take credit for it.
Well, this is fun. You're doing a great service. I love to talk to people who are attorneys, but they have kind of a passion for technology. And you're definitely one of those people. And then also, I think people have an idea of your attorney. You're like a very stiff person. And you're just not that way. So I love you just have so much energy and so much knowledge and just passion. It just comes through for sure. But why don't you tell me about kind of your journey into privacy? What is it about privacy that got you interested in sort of how you got to where you are right now?
Well, privacy for me is kind of a stepping stone. I've always seen technology. It made sense to me just, all along throughout my practice, technological tools and how I can use them to leverage it to the benefit of my clients, to bring about the greater good. So, and you're right, I don't sound like other attorneys because I'm not money motivated. I don't want fame and fortune. I want change. And it's just a different kind of mindset. So, in going about these things, I see privacy as the key part of moving forward in my plan for increasing access to justice. So I'm a consumer rights lawyer at heart. I always wanted to work at the intersection of money and the law, and I want to do what I can to make it a more equitable system. It's never going to be fair because we live in a capitalist society, but it needs to be more transparent and more equitable for people. So as technology goes, there's a lag between technology and regulation. You got to innovate and then see what the harm is, and then knee-jerk regulation and then litigate it out after that, and then people know what to do with it. So privacy is one of those things where we haven't gotten to that stage yet. So for consumer rights to get to the point where we can increase access to justice in a meaningful way, I need data to be worked out. I need privacy rights. I need people to have the rights, not quite ownership, because I don't think we'll get there, but agency to control access and use of their data. So if data brokers are regulated as credit reporting agencies, then you'll get the rights to know what they have, the right to have them corrected if it's wrong, and the right to sue them if they don't. That'll lead us a long way towards cleaning up the information we have. Once we have cleaner data and better systems in place, then we can move to what I really want to do, which is increase access to justice by bringing about an online dispute resolution system for low value cases. Court is a service, not a place, and people should be able to handle these things on their own without a lawyer. And we can't have a system like that in place when we treat data this way now and we don't have privacy rights, because we've automated systemic racism, and that's going to exacerbate the issue. So we can't change the judiciary yet until we have a more trustworthy, practices about data and more enforceable rights, so that we can put it into a new system and then have faith in that system moving forward. So privacy is kind of a stepping stone for me.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's amazing. I love that you are focused on kind of access to justice issues. So I've always been concerned. First of all, even without privacy issues, we have a tremendous access to justice issue. I think there was a statistic that I saw in Illinois that it was like staggering. I want to say more than 90% of people who show up in court are not represented,
Yes.
which is horrible. And so as I was seeing over the years, technology be developed and kind of data being more data collected and used in different ways, it just, I'm dismayed by the advances in technology and sort of law not keeping up at all. There's one thing, law technology will always outpace technology, but like we're light years ahead of where the legal system needs to be. And I feel like the way the data is being collected now, we're like creating like a new caste system, in my opinion, because unfortunately, privacy now is kind of like who can afford privacy, who can afford to buy an iPhone, who can afford, different things. Like I like to say, like Warren Buffett doesn't have privacy problems. You know what I mean? So, it's just kind of the rest of us trying to figure out, first of all, what data the organizations have about us. Is it even accurate? What is it being used for? And that part just isn't as transparent as it should be.
I agree. Yeah, you're right about that. Privacy is one of those things that the founding fathers should have included. And believe me, if TMZ had their drones flying over the Jefferson plantation, watching on what's going on, we'd have a right of privacy today. They did not anticipate these sorts of invasive things happening. They really didn't. So
Right.
here's a visual for you.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So what is happening? You post a lot, you write a lot. I follow your stuff religiously. You really dig in deep with the issues. So tell me what's happening right now in privacy that's kind of got your goat or has raised your eyebrow.
I want to invest more in data destruction technologies. And then once we're there, I want to mandate their use, because we're awash in unstructured data and we're not slowing down on collecting. And the 5G network is predicted for each user to generate a terabyte of data a day. Well, what are we going to do with all of that data? And now that we are moving to a geopolitical, consensus on privacy is as at least something that's important. In some places, it's a right. But I mean, it deserves different treatment. So you can't just keep collecting and hoarding all of this data. So I think data destruction technologies, we need to do that. What really bothers me lately is technology stacks with open source, and they didn't audit anything in it. And they're trying to move forward. They just move too fast to get things put together, and they're not building things the right way. So, I'm seeing a lot of that, and also vendor contracts. I'm seeing a lot of problems with vendor contracts, because you finally get a program in place and then you get to change all the vendor contracts to make sure they comply. And if they don't, can you ditch the contract? And I'm seeing internal struggles between like CISOs and in-house counsel, because the CISOs like, we got to do this, make these changes, and in-house counsel says, you don't tell me what to do with my contracts. And so lawyers are sometimes like terminators. You got to bring in another terminator to take them down or get them back in the box or whatever. So coming in to handle those kinds of disputes. But I am seeing more CISOs stepping forward to say, I'm going to own this until it gets done and then hand it off to whoever needs to do it. So, I mean, it's encouraging to see the overlap of security and privacy starting to work together with legal to move forward. Pretty much everybody lining up over here against marketing. But those are some of the things that I see. What really gets me, what really gets my goat, as you said, is the dark money influence in DC. So in the last 3 years, especially, it has been raining new white men and money from the West Coast. And this is a town whose cup already overflows in both categories. But hey, the more the merrier, right? Welcome, Jared's. So they're all there and they're all, working on these things. But what people don't really understand when it comes to privacy and technology, the stalemate, is because there's so many big money interests in technology, and they all have disparate interests in where they want to go. So none of the stakeholders are all fighting for the same thing. We want this or we want that. They all want their own custom kind of thing going on. So there's no consensus amongst the power brokers in the dark money world about what they want. So until they can decide what it is that they want, they can't tell the legislators what they need. And we've got the stalemate. Add on top of that the excitement of midterm elections this year. And I don't know that I see a lot getting done, and it may not be the worst thing, because if something gets done hastily, it could be done poorly as well. So I think that's what bothers me the most, is that they can't get on the same page. Like you're all there to do something. Like there are too many think tanks thinking about themselves. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I don't like to make money on people's pain. You know what I mean? Some people
I'm a
do.
lawyer. Farmer got a farm.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think when elections come up, I know that nothing is going to happen on privacy. So, election years, midterm, people in political circles, they're trying to get elected. And privacy hasn't really raised to the level that gets talked about, right? So, if they had a top 10 list, privacy doesn't even end up on that list, because a
Well,
lot of
folks
times
are talking about it. They're definitely polling on it to see if we can
Mhm,
get something done in this area. Will it help us, in terms
mhm.
of this or that? They're definitely polling on it. But like I said, the opposition here, you've got to line up the opposition, and they have to, like, what are your demands? Pretty much, you're holding legislation hostage, and you haven't told us what your demands are so that we can work on coming to a compromise. It's pretty much just hold the status quo until we can figure things out, or until after the election. But I don't know. My history in public policy goes back to I'm not going to date myself here, but it goes back to the Clinton administration. So I went to undergrad at George Washington University, and I went to school full time, and I worked full time at a lobbying law firm, and I attended bar a couple of nights a week, because rent in Georgetown is crazy.
Yeah.
But between all of that, learning in the classroom and then doing the work, when I left Washington, I had a bachelor's in international affairs and government relations, and a couple of years of practical experience in big law doing that work. Plus, I was serving them drinks when they were done. So I definitely met some people and saw some things. But most importantly, I think I figured out how things really work. And it goes back to the relationships. So the new people showing up in Washington, like, look at Microsoft. I mean, they just announced a huge, huge acquisition. Have you heard even a whiff of antitrust in the news about it? No, you have
No.
not. Exactly, because they have played the long game for a long time in Washington, and they've got a relationship of trust with the lawmakers that are there in the establishment in Washington. And when they call upon Microsoft, they show up like they're starting to catch a little heat. They can't get by unscathed, but by and large, like, they are in the trust category because they played the long game in politics. So Apple kind of did the same thing. It's starting to unravel a little bit on them now with the App Store issues. But it's kind of the same thing when you look at how things get done in Washington.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So I think when we're thinking about Let's talk about this new thing that came out recently. So there was an article that was posted about certain companies lost, I don't know, over $200 billion in market value as a result of Apple's app transparency, privacy changes that they made. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's amazing that they said, "Do you want privacy?" And 96% of the people said, "Yes, I do." So I think that is fantastic. The consumers are the ones that need to drive this push. And what I started doing a couple of years ago is when Google announced the end of the cookie, I started switching my people over to first party consent systems, and redo the marketing, and let's use different analytics and all of the different alternatives that are out there and available. And so they got a head start on collecting the consent and starting to work on these relationships with their clients. So now that people are looking into it, they're telling me that, clients are coming to me finding out what's going on and how do you treat my data, and they're pleased that this has always been the way that it's been done, and it gives us, positive brand messaging for privacy and trust as part of our brand messaging now, whereas before these other companies, they surreptitiously stole our data and continue to misuse it against us. So yeah, I think everybody, the collective we, are ready for a more trust-based system, and privacy is at the forefront of that. How do you treat me as a person? We've been through some stuff lately. How are you treating me right now? So that's where we are, I think.
Yeah, I think the great thing that the Apple did, and I'm happy that they did it, is that they've proven, right, in a money, dollars and cents way, that privacy can be profitable. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they've had some of their biggest quarters ever, as right on the heels of announcing this kind of app transparency, and that's because they did play the long game. They sort of built that trust in, and then to me, this is a wide open issue because consumers need help, right? So we don't know how to help ourselves. We don't know the threats that are out there. So any and all companies or organizations or whoever who's working either on education or technology, anything to help people do better, I think they'll do well. So I'm hoping to see more investment for into kind of this privacy enhancing tech space. I want to see more companies think about privacy kind of foundationally as they build tools, because it's only going to help them to make money, right? So before it was like, I think people thought about privacy as a tax. Like, oh my God, it's just this other thing that I have to do.
It's compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's overhead. It's compliance work. Yeah, that's what they think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where this is actually something that can add to the bottom line of an organization. What do you think?
Oh, I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad you said that. That's part of my pitch when I go in to talk to companies that I work with, is that yes, traditionally it's compliance work, but once it's a mature system and it's up and running, there are so many creative avenues to explore. So we've been able to open new verticals and creative new ways so that we could monetize the data within the privacy ecosystem. Right. But you've got to have that existing privacy ecosystem before you can go in and take the next step. So I explain privacy maturity in terms of crawling, walking, and then running. Once you're running, then you can really start to optimize and get better results for your business and for your customers. So there is a long-term game. The return for the investments in investing in a privacy program are shown every year in the Cisco report. And they keep coming out every year and showing, all of these great returns that are coming back. A lot of it is brand reputation. And so that's something that has the most value to people right now, especially in the cancel culture. They just want to make sure they don't run afoul of what people are doing. So yeah, I think one of the best things people can do is also look to the advertising. You don't need to track and harass people. There's a lot of information out there from people who have switched over to privacy-based and contextual advertising, and they're having stellar results with it. You can find information like that all over the place. So, I'm not hearing companies when they're crying to me about the end of the world is coming because you can't track and surveil people. If we were happy with being tracked, surveilled, harassed, and hacked all the time, we'd stick with Web 2, but we're not. We're building Web 3 because we want more privacy and more control.
Right. Well, let's talk about third-party data risk. we know that a lot of laws are circling around this idea of, if I give my data to a first party data company and they decide to transfer it to a third party, there's especially on the state level in the US, they're adding more consent there as opposed to just notice. And then obviously in the EU, definitely there's consent there. So tell me your thoughts about the landscape on kind of the third party data sharing or third party risk thing that's happening right now in the world.
It looks to me like, in general, contracts, when you set them up, you do indemnity and kick it down chain. These regulations are some of the first to turn around and liability runs up chain. So now you're responsible for whatever's happening. What I'm seeing is people don't know what's happening. I mean, yeah, your third party affiliates. Well, how many affiliates is it? Oh, 300. Well, how many affiliates do they have? 6,000. Oh, well, how many different places did it go now? And it's hard because once it's out of your infrastructure, you can't map that data. You also can't get it back. Well, how long did you say you'd keep it? Because if you said you'd keep it as long as reasonably necessary, and that might mean forever, who knows? But how long are they going to keep it? What if they get sold or acquired to someone else? They're taking that data with them. I mean, you don't have any control over that third party data. So when you do the vendor contracts, you've got to make sure that you're using the right vendors that aren't going to get you in a jam, because you can try to paper your indemnity as much as you want. It's still coming back to you. So I think that's where businesses need to know that these are things that are out of your control. And the bottom line in law is this: it still costs real time and money to get you out of trouble you may or may not be in.
Right, exactly. You're going to pay one way or another. So being proactive is really the way to go. So let's talk a little bit about proactivity. So I think the problem we have with privacy, and I also see this in sort of AI and kind of emerging technology, is that some people think, all we need is a regulation and we'll be great. But the problem is some of the harm that happens to individuals as a result of kind of misuse or abuse of people's data. To me, the harm may come fast, right? And there may not be any adequate redress. So talk to me about privacy in more of the proactive ways, because can't chase the ambulance on this. There will be no ambulance as far as I'm concerned. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I recently wrote a paper because I started working on a project with data privacy and applicant tracking systems, ATS systems used in HR departments where people apply online for a job and they parse your resume and whatever. So I had done a lot of research in AI to figure out how it works and whatnot, and I wanted to find out how privacy plays a role in that, because AI is so research and development based right now. It's still such a nascent technology. And where we are in AI right now is everybody's calling everything AI. That's where we're at right now. Right. Yeah. So I started looking at that. And then, I started looking at it in the employment context, because I was reading all these, papers that said we have all these exposures to liability here, there, and everywhere else. And I didn't see anybody do anything about it. We're still trying to get people to categorize data. Meanwhile, they're saying once it's categorized, you have to treat this a separate way. And they still haven't gone through step one. So nobody's doing anything about it. So all of these technologies that are out there running massive amounts of data from God knows where, violations are happening there. Like, I learned data privacy and technology so that I could fight the consumer rights violations where they're happening. And there they are. The first individual that asked me to consider taking one of these cases had tracked their efforts over 6 months of job searching, looking at the posting. Do I fit? Researching, do I want to work with this company? Getting the resume together, sending it through, and then tracking whatever came back. And then there were patterns that emerged over that with data brokers and things like that. This individual had tracked their progress for 6 months, and that spreadsheet had 172 potential defendants. I was crushed, and not by the scope of the work, but by the scale of the damage to the human spirit. I mean, imagine that much rejection and ghosting and never knowing why you're not going any further because a human never even saw you. So in this case, you're trying to give people information, your data, and you want them to see it, but they're not even seeing that. They're seeing data that was compiled by someone else that they think this is a representation of you. And the computer decides to make a decision whether you go in the trash or not from there. So I think that it's wildly illegal. I'll just start there, but you've got to be able to prove it. And so the courts have been looking for concrete harm for a long time when it comes to privacy cases. And so I see a shift now that we are in a better position. The court has signaled that they are ready to hear these sorts of cases. I think this is a great time to start this sort of awareness project and bring these things to the forefront so that people build better systems and don't get into this situation. These systems are not designed by a bunch of racists somewhere trying to screw people. They're designed by developers who don't employ ethics in their decision making, and no design choice is neutral. So in looking at all of these things and what's going on, I decided, you know what, I got to start doing something about this and learning as much as I can and working with other people in other ways to do something about this, because there is such a lack of knowledge and the harm is so pervasive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, I'm glad you touched on this. So this kind of goes into bias as well in digital systems and stuff like that. And so part of the defensiveness that I've seen with people, they sort of think that you're accusing them of being racist. And that's not necessarily what people are saying. Is like, okay, you may have a perspective that's very narrow. And if you aren't including different types of people who have different types of experiences, you may not see those gaps, right? So we saw, I want you to comment on that, and then I want to ask you about the IRS.
Right. It doesn't even get to be that far as to someone is making a decision. It's just in the code. Here's the shortcut to optimize for this to that. And I'm looking for these features. And so those features may be your zip code. And so, yep, I'm looking in this zip code because people who live closer to the office are happier because they have a shorter commute, right? But that's not fair, because the people that live right outside your zip code may also want to apply to this job, but it's a poor neighborhood and they have to use the bus and you don't think they're going to be happy. And so you exclude all of these people just because it made sense to you that, oh yeah, people are happier when they're closer to work. And so it wasn't the decision they thought they were making. It's a decision that they made that had impacts that they weren't thinking about. So that's why you got to have the right tech stack of people, data scientists and ethicists and all of these other people to help you when you're designing these AI models to avoid this, because the data set itself is where the bias is. And then you compound that with the coding for the shortcuts on how to access the bias data. And when it comes to racism, I tell people, yes, we all are. And that's how we have been conditioned. What's important is that you learn where your biases are and you take proactive measures to make sure that you don't fall into those traps. But please don't take offense at being a racist, because we all are. This is the country that we live in. Like, I think people need to get over the whole like racist, haters and bigots and white supremacists. Those people are a problem and they're not new. Our collective awareness of them is what's new. So yeah, I mean, that's a whole other set of snakes right there. But yeah, I think it's not really the decisions people are making when it comes to technology. It's the impacts they're not thinking about being made from those decisions.
Right, exactly. So that all means we just need to be able to work together. So tell me about collaboration. So I think one of the things that I enjoy about privacy, and just something I enjoy in general, is kind of working with people across different groups, right? So trying to silo too much information, right, or too much, collaboration doesn't happen the way that it should happen. And so in order to be mature in privacy, you have to have these conversations with people at all levels. You have to make sure that they understand kind of the big picture, not just the part of organization or what they do in particular, but understanding the impact of what they do to the whole. So tell me a little bit about that. So to me, that's kind of a new thing where to me in the past, even the way the MBA programs are taught, they're very taught in siloed ways, right? So then when people get in organizations, very few people can kind of cut across those silos. So tell me a little bit about that.
I think the EQ is where people are at now, the emotional intelligence. Like, yes, you've got leadership skills, but do you have the right empathy level to understand the people on your team? Because when you meet people, you want to have a right fit. And fit doesn't mean they're like everybody else. Fit means they fit the need for what you have for that individual to do. Diversity of thought requires what can you bring to the table? And also what's your background so that you can bring something other than what we have. Team building is part of building consensus. So you do want people that all think differently, but can also feel a part of an overall team. There's cohesion. And so you feel supported when you're able to know your role and know what everybody else's role is, and you're working towards a common goal. It helps move things forward in the project. So I think that's another area where I can help people that are working on projects that don't have in-house people and they're bringing in consultants and whatnot. That's something else to help build a collaborative effort so that everybody does feel understood and valued. And people need a purpose because we're bringing change. First, it's compliance and it's change. And I got to do things differently. Tell me why. Well, if you do and give them a buy-in, you are more likely to have them support you. And then, you can let them know this is ultimately our goal is to do this so that everybody else can succeed together. And hopefully you get your buy-in. You always have a couple of rotten apples that really just don't want to have to change the way they do anything. But that's where you can find the right people on your team to be the early adopter and personally work with the rotten apples in your favor to help turn the tide and keep the project going. So that's part of the collaboration part is I think the empathy level to connect on a human level with people and understand how do you work and where can we put you in the right environment so everybody can move forward together and feel good about it, because unhappy people make bad technology.
I never thought of it that way. I think that's true. Let's talk about something that's been in the news recently, and that is the IRS trying to use a vendor to do facial recognition for their identity system. So certain activities that someone, like say you had an irs.gov account, you would normally log in with a username and password, and IRS is trying to use a third-party vendor to do this very invasive, in my opinion,
But they're not going to
process.
they're not no, they're not going to get to do that. They announced, hey, we'd like to, and people got big mad, myself included.
Yeah.
So I think the best article I saw on this was Dr. Joy Bodolumi, and she is with the Algorithmic Justice League, and it was in the Atlantic, and
Yeah.
she wrote a great article on exactly why this should not be used. But I want to go back earlier, like the AI, one of my favorite AI ethicists, Mashika, as well. She's got a great point. AI is still R&D, and people need to understand that. And also, the government is the government, man. They're not really good at many things. They're just not. And so you want to give them this kind of control over this kind of data. I can't get another face. And I can't argue with my government that they've got my face wrong, because then I'm going to end up in red tape. And then, like the impacts are so far reaching from such a bad decision that I don't think this is going to move forward. And if it does, it's going to be mired in lawsuits from, as far as the eye can see. There are enough people on the side of, oh, hell no, that I really don't think this is going to be able to happen. But it has sparked a lot of public debate. And I'm glad it's getting people thinking about how this can be thrust upon you without your being asked for consent. I mean, that's dangerous.
Yeah, and I just mentioned the article. Dr. Joy, she did the documentary Coded Bias, and she
Yep.
did write an article in the Atlantic. I saw it. It's great. So anyone can read it. It's a very well thought out thing. And so for me as a woman of color, knowing that I'm 10 to 100 times more likely to be misidentified in facial recognition systems, this obviously concerns me greatly. I think, I'm glad that people sort of have been raising their eyebrows about this and make me vocal that they weren't concerned about this. But let's back up. So let's pretend like this at the very beginning, when IRS or any government was kind of thinking about this type of step. Like what should they have been doing before they got to this point differently?
Oh, for fraud?
Yeah, or just, their solution is kind of overboard for what the problem is, right? Because
Well, it's new
unless
people. Yeah, it's new people, and they have a shortage of people over there. They can't find enough people to work at the IRS, and they have more work than ever. And so it's just government inefficiency. That's how it is. And so at this point, they're looking for what can I do that will cut down on the amount of work. I want to outsource this to a tech tool. That's a lot of the problem with the automation of systemic racism is that they've outsourced human responsibilities to the machines. And if you're going to do that, you have to have a human in the loop to make sure that you are handling things responsibly. Otherwise, you're creating liabilities. And so I think what they did was say, what's a technology solution for us to do this? All right, that sounds great. Let's throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. I don't think they expected this kind of blowback.
no, I don't think so either. And then two, my thing is like if you want to boil a kettle of fish, you don't have to boil the whole ocean, right? So if
Mhm.
fraud was their focus, they should focus on the percentage of transactions that they think are fraudulent, not try to put everyone through this whole process.
Or they could look at other technology tools that are being used by multinational conglomerates that have been working on AML for years. Yeah, that technology is not secret. There's a brew right tool for AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch, and that tool is open and available. You can contact the people over there if you want to use those tools. There are over, I don't know, a dozen different applications in there to track anti-money laundering, know your client, free beer. It's all in the supply chain. But they had to build a system to track the data and find the information, but it was based on regulatory compliance obligations for the fraud. So for fraud detection has had years of R&D done on that already, but not by the government. So I think that's where they need to look outside. So ID.me is not really a company they need to look at. Right? Some new whiz bang technology company, they're going to end up in a clear AI situation. Like we don't need that. We need to look at other industries that have been doing this for other purposes, and it's not just their sole purpose is to sell the government technology. I think we need to look at other applications of these things. I recently started working on a new project. And it's the trickiest kind of data I think I've encountered yet. You want to take a guess?
Oh my goodness, I don't know what it could possibly be. I have
Cannabis.
what?
Cannabis.
Canvas?
Cannabis. Hemp and cannabis.
Cannabis. Oh yeah.
Yes. So I have a
Oh
client,
wow.
and we're starting to work on building AI models for the cannabis supply chain. And so when it comes to cannabis, some of that personal information over here, it's medical, and so it's health data. But over in this state, it's evidence of criminal behavior may be used against you in housing, lending, something like that. But it's all the same data. So it kind of depends on where that data is, the nature of the sensitivity of that data, and how it can or should be used. So, I mean, that's it. There's so many different layers to this project. Not only the supply chain has to be tracked from seed to sale, but you can't have people in the same verticals either, because there's a history of organized crime taking over all the verticals in New York. So they passed a law for cannabis saying that it's got to change over. If you're a grower, you're a grower. If you're a distributor, that's what you do. So the supply chain still has to be tracked all the way, but all of this data still has to change hands. And a lot of it does include some personal information, some of it health information. I think it's the trickiest data I've encountered yet. What are your thoughts?
Oh wow. You know what? That's crazy. I guess it would be crazy because it's different from state to state. So I live in Illinois, and cannabis is legal up to a certain amount, I guess. And it's heavily regulated here. But then I drive 30 miles away in Indiana, and it's illegal, right? So you have kind of these state line issues. So there's kind of this medical, like you said, there's kind of medical stuff. There's recreational. Who's to say
Now,
that,
now put privacy data on top of that. Is it
right?
sensitive? Is it personal? Like put that layer on top of it and then keep layering the onion. It all stinks, let me tell you. But it
Right.
because it's hard, I'm not deterred and I think it's possible. I'm excited about having access to so many different smart people to help me work with this. All of the people that you need, the think stack to help you build something like this. It's going to take years and cost $1 bazillion, but somebody needs to do this. And not for nothing, my client is building this system because he's established a partnership relationship management platform for Black entrepreneurs in the cannabis and hemp industries to network and share opportunities and provide services to each other so that they can go forward. He encountered systemic racism in the applications process and said, I want to build something different. So he and I found each other a few years ago and started doing that. So I'm pretty excited about the social impact of this project, as well as the complexity and potentially the opportunity to build it on something like Hedera, so that we lower the carbon footprint of this kind of a tool.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow, look at you. I love that. I love that. I think too, the US is just so complicated, right? Just because we say we're the United States, we're kind of like the divided states of America. We share a common currency. That's basically it. So you go to a different state and it's like being in a different country. And so these are really hard regulations. And then certain states play off of one another. You know what I mean? So like we're for example, in Illinois, cannabis is legal, right? And it's illegal in Indiana. So maybe in Indiana, they may sell like other accessories, right? They can't sell cannabis. They sell accessories cheaper. So it's like there's a lot of like cross-state stuff that's happening. And it's absolutely bananas.
Yeah, but it's also one of those industries that is moving forward and we can kind of tell where it's going to go. So yeah, I think that's it's interesting as well. But like I said, we've got to design better systems for the way that we use data before I want to start going and messing with access to justice based on data systems. Like we've got to have better reliance and more control over our data, and then we can start to tackle bigger issues.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if it were the world according to Heidi and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world or in any sector? So whether it's technology, law, human stuff, what are your thoughts?
Can I split it into a personal, like a PSA and a wish?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So the PSA is, please do not contact me if you're looking for a rubber stamp of what you're already doing with your privacy program. That's not what I do. I'm not a rubber stamp girl. My clients know the value in bringing in a consultant that can tell them something they don't know. So if you're looking, because I got the CIPP-JD and people are always after that. They're sweating me hard for that because they want the rubber stamp, and that's not me. So that's my PSA. Don't come to me for that. And if I'm having the chance to make a wish, I want to wish for people to start caring more about each other as humans. And I think we could really go a lot of good places if we just started with that.
Oh, look at you. I love that. We're talking about data and it gets very technical, but this is a human issue, right? So you're dealing with humans. So I think understanding that and coming back to that as a focus, right? What would you want done to you or your data?
Yeah. Well, think about the English speakers in the EU. They're talking about privacy. They even say it differently. The way they say it sounds like a right. They treat people differently. They call them data protection subjects and, the data subjects themselves, and they're not called users like they are, subject to a dealer or something.
Right.
Even the way they say privacy, it sounds like it has rights attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've got a long way to go here in our country, but I think the good news is that we are at the second stage of awakening. We've gone through the Snowden awakening, now we're at the Hagen awakening, and so everybody else is starting to catch on to see the impacts. And so I think we have more support because we've been out there telling people, here's what we need to do for a while. I think now we're finally getting the support where they're like, oh, great. And you know how to do it. Great, I'll call you. So I think that the busier that we get doing this type of work, the more encouraging it is overall for privacy, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love to see more focus, and I like to see, I guess what I'm loving to see now is that it's more mainstream in media. So before it wasn't. It was kind of like little groups, and we kind of talk amongst ourselves, right?
We're making it cool. You and we're totally making it cool because that's what we do. It's how we roll. We're making it totally cool.
Exactly. So I'm hoping we can continue to do that. So this was so much fun. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Okay.